What's up, everyone? It's Michael Scotto, Senior NBA Insider for HoopsHype.com, alongside Cyro, Asseo. We are here live at Barclays Center following the conclusion of the first round of the 2024 NBA Draft. And Cyro, you know, when we look at winners and losers for this NBA Draft, to me, the number one winner, I thought, was the Washington Wizards. First of all, they get Alex Sarr, who, in my opinion, is the best player in this draft, has all-star upside. But I think the way that he kind of maneuvered his way to Washington didn't work out for the Atlanta Hawks with the number one pick. When was the last time that you've seen that, really, for the Washington Wizards? I think it speaks to what slowly executives Michael Winger, Will Dawkins, Travis Schlenk are building in Washington going forward. And then they make a trade, a notable one, moving one of their star young wings in Deni Avdija. And Deni is a guy that, you know, is going to be a nice player for Portland, but they get back some picks. Then they get Bub Carrington, who, from what I've been told from scouts and executives, kind of reminds them a little bit of Karis LeVert on the when he was with the Brooklyn Nets, now with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They get Malcolm Brogdon, an expiring contract, who sources have told HoopsHype is a guy that they'll look to flip going forward in another trade. And last but not least, they get Keyshawn George, a guy that can fill it up from three-point range and be your potential two-guard of the future if they move Corey Kispert. So to me, I thought Washington gave itself great optionality and really went all in on this draft, which they're trying to do, build a lot of young guys. But was there another team that you thought really stuck out when you look at who won this 2024 draft class so far through day one, the first 30 picks?
Well, you started with the Eastern Conference. I think we need to go over to the Western Conference, and there was a team that, similar to the Wizards, they're trying to, really set a direction for themselves, and that is the Utah Jazz. They were a team that over here, I felt like they did a kind of a good job of, staying pat, and Cody Williams fell to them. Probably the best college basketball player this year in the draft, a guy who is the younger brother of Jalen Williams, J-Dub, who has had a meteoric rise in really the short term of his career so far. So when you look at Cody, you're looking at a guy who's going to come in, give you a 3-and-D, maybe even a person that, worst comes to worst, is still going to be a really good, high-level role player if it doesn't work out. But if it does work out, you have somebody who's a safe bet to be a good player. Then you look at the end of the draft for them, as all the picks went, a guy by the name of Isaiah Collier, who was the number one prospect at the start of this draft cycle. He was a guy that even in our mock draft, we had listed at 1 during the aggregate. So for him to fall to them at 29 with a team that we're hearing Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton could be on the move, 2 veteran guards. Keontae George is a guy that they believe is one of their future guards that they're trying to put as a pillar. So maybe they have their future backcourt set now with Isaiah Collier and Keontae George joining Larry Markkinen.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Cyro, you bring up, first off, you started out with Cody Williams, and I think you mentioned the phrase safe bet. And when you look at Cody Williams, when I talked to scouts and executives around the league, they said that this was a player in the draft that they felt had the highest floor. And certainly, if you're going to want a guy that's a contributor, a versatile guy, can play both sides of the ball, shoots the ball efficiently. He started to shoot the 3-ball well as well. I think that's a guy that you can plug anywhere and get production out of, which is what these guys are looking for in the draft. You touch on Isaiah Collier. Isaiah was a guy that, as you mentioned, was in December of 2023, was the number one ranked overall player at that time in the aggregate mock draft for HoopsHype.com. Falls all the way towards the back end of the first round. And if you're Utah, you're talking about a buy low guy that could really hit potentially for where you got him. It's a nice swing, I think, no question. But with that said, those were swings that we thought hit. But I think you and I, when we were looking at this draft class, the first round, I think we both could agree there was one that we felt was a swing and a miss. And it's to me, I mean, Cyro, when I looked at the Milwaukee Bucks and you got Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard in their primes, and they take a teenager who's got a chance to be something down the line in A.J. Johnson, one of the fastest prospects in this draft, a good athlete, has good size for the guard position, but is going to take time to develop. And I just don't think Giannis and Dame have that time. It really struck me as a curious draft pick. You know, they had guys on the board like Ryan Dunn that can be an immediate defensive contributor, and other players that were more ready to have an impact. It even could have been offensively as well. And instead they went with a guy that has some raw talent, but it's going to take time to develop. I mean, to me, that kind of blew me away a little bit.
No, I completely agree. I think we both said it. You're taking a guy who, A.J. Johnson, does not fit the timeline that the Bucks are on. Plus, you have a veteran coach who, Doc Rivers, hasn't been known for player development, okay? He's not a guy who's championed player development in his previous stops. He's a guy who likes to be a veteran coach. So you just drafted a teenager to a team that has championship aspirations, to a team that does not have the time to wait for him to develop, that they need someone to come in and improve. But guess what was their biggest problem last year? Defense. And what did you mention? Oh, Ryan Dunn, arguably the best defender in the class, was still available. Terrence Shannon, still available. Baylor Shireman, still available. Plenty, even Dalen Jones, plenty of quality older role player, like guaranteed role players, were available that many teams knew were going to be guys who can contribute day one. And they take a guy who might not contribute in year one.
Again, A.J. Johnson has upside for down the line. But when you're trying to be a championship contender now, that surprised me. I think also, even before we stepped into the arena today, you talk about championship contenders, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the blockbuster trade between the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets. And I touched on a little bit on HoopsHype. Towards the Brooklyn Bridge right now, you're looking at a little bit more construction, a little bit more detours out there, because right now they've got a lot of detours to get back towards being a championship caliber team like they thought they were going to be when they had the star-studded duo of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and that came in free agency, and then when they traded for James Harden. Then you go towards the Manhattan Bridge and you got the Knicks, and it's like, well, wait a minute, now they're almost in the HOV lane. They're cruising right now in their mind, if they can stay healthy, towards championship contention. If OG Anunoby, who they just signed to a new deal, almost $213 million over 5 years, a guy that nearly got, a max contract. If he can stay healthy, you have him, you have Mikal Bridges. They loaded up on the wings, but now you may lose Isaiah Hartenstein. And for Isaiah, he's gotten a lot of interest. Expected to, I should say, because it's a little early, but where there's smoke, there's fire, folks. So you've got the Thunder, who need to beef up that front court with Chet Holmgren. You've got the Orlando Magic that have some cap space and could use some more depth. So, for the Knicks, I think they're going to have to look to kind of fill that void a little bit. But certainly we have seen a team take a step forward. And for the Nets, they now have a direction. And you're going to rebuild, and it's going to be worth it now, where they're going to tank, for lack of a better phrase. It is what it is, folks. And they get their picks back from Houston in a separate trade, and now they view Jordy Fernandez as the next Kenny Atkinson 2.0, a younger version of that. And now you can build from the ground up. The one thing that Sean Marks and the Nets have done a decent job of, for the most part, unquestionably, has been their drafting. There's going to be a great opportunity for guys like Cam Thomas, Tariq Whitehead, all these young guys. Now is going to be their time. And I think for both sides, it really worked out well. I don't think that the Nets would have gotten as many draft picks elsewhere, especially with the fact that Mikal is a guy that the Villanova Knicks aura added to this, no question.
No, I completely agree. I think the Nets strayed away from their original plan. Yeah. Joe Tsai put them on the express lane, and they went ahead and they went with that Kyrie, James Harden, Kevin Durant, and it crashed and burned. And I think with any infrastructure project, if you want to improve it, you got to rebuild it. And I think that's the direction that they've chosen. They got themselves, a future in terms of draft capital. But like you said, they're going to go ahead and have a player development coach who's going to give them a direction and allow them to at least know that, hey, they're you basically fall into similar blueprints to the Washington Wizards, but basically a year late in the timeline, Wizards had Kristaps Porzingis, Beal, and they still have Kuzma, but then they blew it up last year. This year, we saw the Nets trying to build from mediocrity. And what happens when you try to build from mediocrity? You don't really have a direction. It doesn't work. Best way to go is, blow the bottom out and just start fresh. And I think that's what they did. And it's good that they still have Sean Marks there, who seems to a guy who has done this before. And their talent evaluation, I mean, hey, they were a team that got Kevin Durant and Kyrie with no draft picks. They still owed those to the Boston Celtics, and they were able to do that and find guys like Jared Allen, like Karis LeVert, without having those. So I think it's a bright day for Brooklyn.
Folks, you never want to fix anything with a patch job, especially a roof or a ceiling, and that's almost what the Nets were doing at that time, but now they've totally dismantled, and more to come for the Nets. Certainly, I think you have to look at Cam Johnson. You've got to look at Dorian Finney-Smith, the expiring contracts of Ben Simmons, Dennis Schroeder. You've got Bojan Bogdanovic. We'll see if Bojan ultimately returns to Brooklyn or not, but he's certainly a trade candidate there. Also reported a little bit on Day'Ron Sharpe getting interest around the league a little bit, their backup center. But Cyro, one other thing that, as we're watching these draft picks go, that's going through the back of my mind, is ultimately there's one domino that's going to fall. That's Paul George. Mm-hmm. And for Paul George, he had a chance to sit back, see what teams were going to make a big trade or not. Nobody really, beside the Knicks, made a trade that I would say changed the landscape of things. If maybe San Antonio, let's say, had gotten Trae Young, maybe that could have swayed some things a little bit. With Victor Wembanyama, maybe they would have been ready to compete, but that did not happen. And so now, for Paul George, the domino of Paul George not only affects the Clippers, who are looking to go into a brand new stadium and an arena and looking to sell seats, but the Philadelphia 76ers. OG Anunoby's off the board now. Trying to trade for Jimmy Butler would be difficult. Paul George is a guy that they've wanted, had number one on their board, but I don't know if they're confident that they can land him. And so then, if you miss on Paul George and you've got all this cap space, yes, they're going to bring back Tyrese Maxey on a max contract eventually, but you've got so much to fill in those gaps in between. And that's where things can get interesting, whether it's for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, other players around the league that are really good starting caliber guys and maybe role players, but not the star. And does Daryl Morey pivot towards making a trade, maybe taking on some unwanted salary from somewhere? Time's going to tell, but that is the domino and the big elephant in the room that we're still waiting on, that's going to change the entire landscape potentially of the NBA if Paul George goes from the West Coast to the East. If he stays in the West, more dominoes have to fall in a subcategory, but it's not going to be as big of a shift in the East, certainly.
I think he's definitely interesting. Philadelphia currently has, in terms of guaranteed salaries, about $61 million committed, which is $80 million away from the salary cap floor of $141 million. Salary cap, I guess you would say the luxury tax starts at $171, which basically means they have at least two max contracts. They'd go out, or they could do, what we've been hearing is that they want to spend the money evenly instead of putting it all on one boat. But, you see Nick Claxton get paid today. Mm-hmm. You see OG Anunoby get paid today. And we've all heard, the rumblings that free agency is dying. And the rumblings of Paul George maybe opting into a trade. Mm-hmm. And I think the closer we get to that deadline of him being able to accept an extension from the Clippers, I think it becomes more and more likely that maybe he doesn't reach free agency, because I feel like that limits his options, as there's less cap space available teams. Yeah. In the market, then there would be teams that would be able to trade for him if he opts in. And I think the way that we're seeing these extensions happen, mm-hmm. the A's before free agency, might, like you said, if there's smoke, there might be fire. In that terms, when was the last time we had a big name free agent actually make it to free agency? Yeah,
look, certainly in years past, we've seen the guy like, Fred VanVleet switch and others, but even in like restricted free agency, you would see guys do sign-in trades. Certainly Larry Markkinen comes to mind, who turned out pretty well, I would say, but definitely a lot of dominoes still fall here. But Cyro, anything else stick out to you from day one here, and just the free agency rumblings as we're nearing the start of the free agency period as well that stick out to you?
I think the only thing that really sticks out to me is that I think we're going to see teams maybe just spend their cap space a bit more. I don't think there's going to be as many long-term deals. I feel like a lot more shorter-term deals, because I think a lot of people with the aprons, and this year being maybe the first year of that, I don't think anyone wants to put themselves in a juxtaposition.
Bruce Brown set the standard, folks. I'm telling you, that high average annual salary the first year, got the team option year too, and
flexibility.
Yeah, for both sides, it worked out well. But I think ultimately, Cyro, a lot to unpack here from day one, and looking ahead, more dominoes to fall. For Cyro Asseo, I'm Michael Scotto, Senior NBA Insider for HoopsHype.com. Thanks for watching.